The one of more significance to me is Andrew Leingang from yesterday, who is a 3-star offensive lineman, but Minnesota and Stanford offers. Minnesota wanted him very badly. Stanford wanted him very badly, came in late. And K-State fans certainly were very worried about this. But like Conor Riley takes a lot of heat from those who really follow K-State recruiting closely. And I think a lot of it is pretty unfair because there were some high-profile offensive linemen in-state right away in that 2020 class where the expectation was you should be able to, in your first recruiting cycle, be able to go out and land Turner Corcoran, who's a national recruit out of Lawrence, on the O-line. You should be able to land Hayden Pauls. There was such a great crop of local offensive linemen, and I think it has proven out over time that it really is the toughest sell K-State has had is with some of these in-state prospects, getting them to change their opinion of what K-State's program is, because for so long it had become very bland and very stale. And so it was a tough ask to go land Turner Corcoran and Hayden Pauls and Alex Kahn out of Derby, who was also in that class. K-State wound up with none of them, and I think that formulated a lot of people's preconceived notion about Conor Riley recruiting the offensive line, which is not even totally fair because it's not – these guys do regions too. It's not like every single offensive lineman is all on Conor Riley. There are so many things that can affect what's happening there. But for fans, it becomes very easy tunnel vision, and you want a scapegoat. When something happens, when your team loses the game, you want a scapegoat. And I'm just here to say that it may not be these high-profile local kids that everybody wanted right away, but Conor Riley, I think, has done a fine job recruiting the offensive line over the last 2 years. And now, all of a sudden, you throw Andrew Leingang in here, who I think K-State would tell you they prefer actually to Noah Boltikoff, who was committed and then left to go to TCU. And then you have Carver Willis, who chose K-State over Texas Tech and Kansas, a tackle from last year. You have Whit Mitchum, who had the SEC sniffing around and wanting him to wait until later. He wound up signing with K-State. Yeah, not whispering, but sniffing. All right, that's some sniffing, not some whispering. Now you have Leingang, who had Stanford and Minnesota offers. If you want to count Taylor Warner, who initially wasn't sure if he was going to be an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. Now he's working on the offensive line, and he's the guy drawing all the rave reviews from everybody. And then you've got Beebe, Revis, Weiner. I mean, there are some names here, and there is some talent on the offensive line. And I feel very good about where that's heading, not just based on, hey, I believe in these guys and who they're recruiting, but based on who K-State beat out to get a lot of these kids along the offensive line.
Yeah, they start to stack up a little bit quicker than you would think. And this staff was going to be in the impossible position of staring down the barrel of a situation where you were going to be out of linemen just like that. I mean, in theory, you lose 4.5 starters from last year because Revis was split in time, so he comes back. But that was going to be a tough spot, and offensive linemen are one of those where they're not coming in physically ready most of the time to play Division I football. It's like in basketball. Why do bigs seem to have success earlier? Well, it's because they're probably a little bit more developed, can get by on their size. Some of these guards, like Dejuan Gordon, he needs to beef up a little bit. He needs to experience some of this. That's what you need with the offensive line. And so you want this immediate fix. You're not going to get it. And slowly but surely it's coming together. You get a couple in a class here, a couple there, you're fine. And things look drastically different now because even though you may have to deal with some inexperience this year that can be frustrating, in theory, all 5 of these guys are going to be back next year because they're getting that year of eligibility back. So your offensive line situation has already changed so much within the last, couple of weeks for the outlook coming forward that they're now all of a sudden probably in a pretty decent spot moving forward on the offensive line. And we know Conor Riley can coach,
yes,
and the recruiting is starting to come along with guys that seem to fit the part.
Because you had a very similar offense. The O-line last year, recruiting pedigree is very similar to what we're seeing right now. I mean, Adam Holtorf, I'm looking at his offers right now. Harvard, Holy Cross, Illinois State, Liberty. Okay. You had Nick Kaltmeyer. He was a transfer from, I believe it was Western Illinois, who came in. I mean, that was somebody with no fanfare. He started a ton of games on the offensive line. Now, Scott France was a 5'7". He was a high 3-star. Scott France was a really nice pickup and a nice get. But outside of that, I mean, the rest of the offensive line, and who am I missing from last year's O-line?
Well, I mean, I guess, you've got them.
I mean, like Josh Revis. Josh Revis was playing.
Back. Evan
Revis,
Curl.
Yeah, these are not guys that were super highly rated recruits. And now they're also mixing in players that fit their profile. That's the other part of this. They want a different type of offensive lineman. They want their offensive tackles to be more athletic. It's a different type of player that they're recruiting, which theoretically makes the fit better.
Well, and the whole Taylor Warner thing is a good example of how things can flip around so quickly, because at first you look at this class and you go, oh, well, there's not an offensive lineman that sticks out to me. But, what if we had known back then and said, well, Taylor Warner is actually, without a doubt, going to be an offensive lineman at K-State. Maybe that changes your thought process a little bit. There are just so many unpredictable things that can come about.